my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, I want to dive deeper into Islam. The reason why is because if you've watched my previous video where we were talking about Islam, um, it seems like there's kind of a growing emphasis on understanding Muslims, and we've talked about how my theory is that, we're approaching the second coming. We know that during the second coming, into the millennium, missionary work is going to continue. There will be still other religions, all different types of faiths, including Islam, and Islam makes up a quarter of the world population. Just under a quarter is like 24 point something percent. They're the fastest growing religion. And so you would think, as the leadership of the church, the prophet, first presidency, quorum of the 12, as we draw nearer and nearer to the second coming, you're going to want to have a plan for a quarter of the world population, right? Um, so we've noted a few different things on the channel. So let me just show you a few things. And then at the end, I want to read this article called Understanding Islam by Daniel C. Peterson, Professor of Islamic Studies and Arabic, BYU. Okay, so we have this that happened where you had Elders Bednar and Gong at BYU, and they were introducing the new pamphlet. Okay, if you go to the church website, there's actually a section called Interfaith Relations, and it takes you to this pamphlet, so you can understand more about Islam. And I really do think that we need to look at it from that perspective. The perspective that we have a large population that's many of them are going to continue into the millennium. I don't know how many, but probably a sizable portion of terrestrial law-abiding people moving into the millennium, and we need to be ready to receive them if any of them decide to convert once Christ comes. Probably not all of them will, and that's probably true of all different faiths, but we need to be ready to receive an influx of converts, because if you're someone that's living a good life and you're trying to do the best you can, you're probably more open to truth, right? And it might be a hard pill to swallow once the truth comes out, but you're going to want to conform to your Heavenly Father's will and learn more about Him and do what He wants you to do. And so there's Brad Wilcox was talking about that in his Fireside February of this year, how many people, once Christ comes and He identifies Himself as the head of this church, they're going to want to join, right? So anyway, I just wanted to highlight a few things before we get into the article. There's this here. This is the 6th of November 2019. First Presidency welcomes leader of Muslim World League. Okay, so this was just a couple years ago, and they gave him a gift here, a copy of The Niche of Lights. That's part of BYU's translation series that they're doing, Islamic translation series. So BYU is working on an Islamic translation series, which of course is probably just because of academic purposes. But I wonder if there's like emphasis on that within recent years. I don't know. Anyway, here you have some pictures, and then it says, Dr. Al-Issa's op-ed admiringly notes Joseph Smith's tolerance of other faiths, quoting Joseph Smith's comment the year before his death that he was, quote, ready to die in defending the rights of a Presbyterian, a Baptist, a good man of any denomination. He also noted Joseph Smith's encouragement to early Latter-day Saints to embrace others in their communities, especially when Latter-day Saints make up most of the population. So that would be the case, of course, in places like certain places in, a lot of places in Utah, certain places in Idaho, and there's other places. Tonga, actually, Samoa, where you have high concentrations of Latter-day Saints. In a similar vein, Dr. Al-Issa wrote, quote, Islam compels Muslims to love our fellow brothers and sisters of all faiths, races, ethnicities, and creeds. And then here's a photo of them in a bishop's storehouse, which it's a good thing. When worlds collide, that's what I would title this. I think it's a good thing. The Muslim leader identified several other significant areas of common ground shared by church members and followers of Islam. Quote, "We each place great importance on daily prayer, on the spiritual power of fasting, and on the belief that faith alone does not secure salvation," he wrote. "We must translate our beliefs into good deeds to the betterment of our world as well." Interestingly, you have Elder Bednar here, and he is the one that's over as far as I know, the last I checked, and I don't think it's changed, he is the one that's over the Middle East. That's his area, so it makes sense that he would be here, involved in this sit down, whatever is taking place here. This week's meetings with Dr. Alissa are an important development in the church's ongoing relationship with followers of Islam. See? They're wanting this. They're trying to establish a good relationship with Muslims. In May of this year, President Russell M. Nelson met with Muslim leaders in New Zealand and presented $100,000 of financial aid from the church to help rebuild the mosques attacked in Christchurch. And if you're a news junkie, if you follow the news, you probably remember when that happened. Okay, and here he is in front of the Salt Lake Temple. Okay. Let's see. This is the 5th of July, 2017, where religious and secular meet. Seventh in a 7-part series on international religious freedom. There was a little thing here I wanted to read that had some interesting information. Religious freedom can offer stability to a world in flux. Depending on geography, religion, and secularism are both growing and declining at the same time. For centuries, the center of Christianity was located in Europe and North America, but has now shifted to the global south. Now that's an interesting concept, isn't it? For so long, it's been in the north, Europe and North America, but it is now shifting south. Christians in Latin America and Africa amount to 1 billion people, and Asia's Christian population of 350 million is expected to reach 460 million by 2025. Orthodox Christian belief and identity have resurged in parts of Central and Eastern Europe during the past 25 years. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, and the global Hindu population is expected to increase by 34% to nearly 1.4 billion by 2050. By then, India, the country of India, will have the world's largest populations of both Hindus and Muslims. And currently, Indonesia has the highest population of Muslims, but I guess that's going to change. It's going to shift to India, so that's interesting. With this big picture in mind, religion is not declining. Nevertheless, the societies of Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, and other parts of the world are becoming more secular, which is very unfortunate and saddening. Those who have no religious affiliation but may still be spiritual are now the second largest group in North America and most areas of Europe. Now, I don't know how to interpret that, but that may not all be bad. And the reason why I say that is because if you think back in history, the big stumbling block, the big obstacle to finding the truth was adherence to a specific religion, right? A specific Christian denomination. In the earlier days of the church, and even in my own lifetime, earlier in my life, it was more about trying to, one, distinguish ourselves from other Christian churches, and that was like a selling point, how we're different. But there's been a shift. Now people are leaving those religions. Those are no longer really, I mean, they still are, but less and less every day are those the obstacles to joining the church. Now, this could be like a new obstacle, but you can see how maybe there's kind of like a disintegration, and previous obstacles for some people are no longer obstacles and may actually help the church. And it may be preparing, people may be prepared for the millennium when the millennium happens. So uh, I don't know that we should necessarily see this as all bad, um, because it could just simply be preparing a certain population of people for Christ when he comes, or just even before he comes, to find the church, and maybe not have those previous dogmas or belief systems interfere. You know what I mean? So anyway, in the United States, the unaffiliated comprise nearly 25% of the population, and many of the world's international government organizations pass resolutions based on secular ethics, not religious authority. Okay. Uh, Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. One thing that was interesting, I came across this talk by, at the time, Elder Russell M. Nelson. This is November 2002. Now, the reason why I came across this is, as you know, I have my phrase tracker. I'll zoom in, and we've already looked for Muslim. I brought this up in another video. There's been a definite uptick in talking or using the word Muslim in general conference. It's been mentioned 3 years in a row, 2019, 2020, and 2021. And when you compare that to previous years, it hardly ever comes up. The first time it comes up is in 1976. And then a couple times in 2001 and 2003, which makes sense because you think about what happened those years, the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, so that makes sense. But then 2015, and then 3 years in a row, 2019, 2020, and 2021, it's brought up again. So there's starting to be more talk. And this, I think, reflects this and what the church is doing. Pamphlets, meeting with the head of the, what was this called again? The leader of the Muslim World League. I've never heard of the Muslim World League, but this is the leader of the Muslim World League. Okay, so the church is looking at this. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at Ishmael. And not to be confused with the Ishmael from the Book of Mormon. We're talking about the original Ishmael, Abraham's son, with Hagar, which was Sarah's handmaiden, right? Uh, Sarah was not able to have children, and so in order to have posterity, she gave Hagar to Abraham to wife so that they could have a child, and his name was Ishmael. But then, by a miracle, Sarah was able to have her own child, which was Isaac, and so the birthright went to Isaac, but Ishmael was still um, important. And I'm bringing up Ishmael because if you don't know, the tradition, the widespread belief is that Ishmael is essentially the father of the Arab nations, and then therefore those nations now that have Islam as their primary faith. Okay, so they're important. It's an Abrahamic faith. They seem to have descended from Ishmael. Uh, their family, okay, they may not be part of the house of Israel as far as how they descended, but they are family. They are extended family when we're looking at Abraham's family. So they're important, and the Lord has a plan for them. And I think it's important that we follow right here in this tab where it says apostles encourage greater understanding of Islam. Maybe there's wisdom in that. Maybe there's wisdom in that. So I wanted to see if Ishmael came up in recent years. It hasn't. He's only, and by the way, when I searched Ishmael, I made sure that I was counting only Ishmael from the Old Testament, not the Book of Mormon Ishmael. So this is just the Ishmael from the Old Testament. So we have 2007, 2002, 1995, and 1980, and that's it. So not very much. In one of the talks, uh, out of these, four, was by President Nelson, which I thought was interesting. President Nelson, throughout his calling as an apostle and now prophet, he has actually commented on many interesting things. He comes up kind of frequently with key concepts and ideas. For example, we were going through section 77 of the Doctrine and Covenants. That's the section that is the question and answer section about the Book of Revelation. And President Nelson comes up a lot in that. When you look at the Scripture Citation Index, and you see, which allows you to see who is citing certain scriptures, right? So we were looking at we were looking to like further understand those verses, and President Nelson has cited Section 77 quite a bit, like by far. Like I think he was actually the one that cited Section 77 the most. He's like in the lead compared to any other general authority of this dispensation. Well, no, since 1942. There's something special about President Nelson. I'll tell you what. In the fact that he came up out of the only 4 times that Ishmael is talked about, President Nelson is one of the people talking about it, right? And if he is the prophet of the second coming, it would make sense that even as far back as back then, even if maybe he wasn't consciously thinking about it, but that this was in some way on his mind. So what did he say? Okay, I'm just going to read this because this should be all of our attitudes when it comes to Islam or even other faiths, but I would say especially Islam, Judaism and Islam, because they are the most related religions to our own. And then the rest of Christianity. So, okay, so this is what he says. And this is in 2002. So you have to remember the context here. The year before that was 2001. We all know what happened in 2001. I have my own ideas about what happened there. I'm not going to go into that because it's beyond the scope of this channel. But anyway, some of you know what I'm talking about. Okay, peace is possible. Because of the long history of hostility upon the earth, many feel that peace is beyond hope. I disagree. Peace is possible. We can learn to love our fellow human beings throughout the world, whether they be Jewish, Islamic, or fellow Christians, whether Hindu, Buddhist, or other. We can live together with mutual admiration and respect without forsaking our religious convictions. Things we have in common are greater than our differences. Peace is a prime priority that pleads our pursuit. Old Testament prophets held out hope, and so should we. The psalmist said, quote, "God is our refuge and strength, and very present help in trouble. He maketh wars to cease unto the end of the earth." Father Abraham was uniquely called, quote, friend of God. Peace was one of Abraham's highest priorities. He sought to be Prince of Peace. Now, remember that's a title of Melchizedek, right? So that's interesting. That's interesting that he sought the same blessings, the same thing as Melchizedek. And we've done videos about Melchizedek and how it seems that Melchizedek and Shem, Noah's son Shem, there's a lot of evidence to point that they're actually the same person. But just go look for that video. Just search my channel for Shem or Melchizedek, and you'll find that video. His influence could loom large in our present pursuit of peace. His sons, Ishmael and Isaac, though born of different mothers, overcame their differences when engaged in a common cause. After their father died, they worked together to bury the mortal remains of their exalted father. Their descendants could well follow that pattern. Abraham's posterity was a divinely decreed potential. Or Abraham's posterity has a divinely decreed potential. Now, notice he's talking about Abraham. So we're not just focusing on Isaac. We're not just focusing on Jacob, the 12 tribes. Uh, Again, there's a relation. The birthright may not have gone through Ishmael, but I think that we should note what President Nelson is noting here, that Abraham's posterity, including Ishmael, has a divinely decreed potential. And I think special things are going to happen now, between now and the second coming, and then definitely in the early part of the millennium when it comes to Ishmael and his descendants, or those that are currently Muslims. Okay. The Lord declared that Ishmael would become a great nation, and that the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would bless all the nations of the earth. So, descendants of Abraham, entrusted with great promises of infinite influence, are in a pivotal position to emerge as peacemakers. Chosen by the Almighty, they can direct their powerful potential toward peace. Resolution of present political problems will require much patience and negotiation. The process would be enhanced greatly if pursued prayerfully. Okay, we've looked at the BYU Jerusalem Center. I have a whole playlist about it, how it could potentially in the future become a temple. And please, for the love of all goodness, I know it wasn't originally made to be a temple. That's not its point, its purpose. I understand that. But what we don't know is the Lord's purposes for it. There's been a lot of hints dropped by Jeffrey R. Holland and others as to its future. Okay, so just because that's not officially what it was created for, the Lord can do whatever He wants, and He may have more purpose to the BYU Jerusalem Center than just being a place for BYU students to go study. Okay, it's in a very, very prominent location. Many miracles went into our ability to even construct it. So just go watch the playlist, and you'll understand why I think that. Okay, so um, a few things here that give us more evidence as to how the church's attitude toward Islam and what we should also emulate. After the onset of the Second Intifada, security for BYU students became increasingly difficult to maintain, and the center closed indefinitely to students in 2000, because that's when that happened. During the fighting, BYU sources reported that the center's staff remained on location and managed to maintain good relations on both Israeli and Palestinian sides. So the church hasn't taken sides between Israel and the Palestinians. You should know that. The church has not taken sides. And I'm not just referring to this right here in 2000. I'm talking about overall the history of this. Of course, we do know that the Jews are meant to return to the land, but in regards to the Palestinians, we don't take sides against them. As negotiations to stop the fighting continued, one proposed settlement had the center placed within the borders of a proposed Palestinian state. This, however, was not the proposal ultimately agreed upon by the two sides. All right. And then down here, mission. Members of the LDS Church believe that Jesus Christ will return in glory in His second coming. Howard W. Hunter, who was president of the church's Quorum of the 12 at the time of the center's construction, pointed out that although there would be no proselytizing from the center, it still served a valuable purpose. One church member quoted him this way, quote, Elder Hunter said that our mission was not to harvest, probably not even to plant, but to clear away a few more stones, end quote. Latter-day Saints often see the center as a way for them to show local Jews that the church is what the church is about by example, rather than proselytizing. So, being an example, this is done by the way the students and faculty at the center live their lives, as well as through the hiring of both Israeli and Palestinian workers, as an example of what can be done through cooperation. During construction of the center, for example, the church hired as many as 300 workers at one time, about 60% of them being Arab, and the other 40% being Jewish. Similar cooperation continues today. So this is the spirit. This is really the way that we should view this as Latter-day Saints. If you have resentments toward them, put that aside. A lot of those things are drummed up by the world, um, politics, people that are pushing different agendas. Um, and I'm not a liberal, by the way, but I think that this is the proper way to view it. We should put the political stuff aside, um, and we should look at it from the spiritual point of view, because that's ultimately the only thing that matters. And there is a very spiritual aspect to this people. They are part of the family of Abraham, and we are part of the family of Abraham. And I'm pretty dang sure that the Lord has a plan for them. So, and then here's the pamphlet. We actually did a video where we read the pamphlet, so you can go search that if you want, but this is also on the church website. So now, let's go ahead and let's try and understand Islam uh, through the eyes of Daniel C. Peterson. And by the way, I love Daniel C. Peterson. He's awesome. He is part of the Interpreter Foundation. I bring them up every now and then. They have a channel. It's called the Interpreter Foundation. Go check them out. These are scholars. These are like LDS scholars, um, and they put together really good material. And I like Daniel C. Peterson's personality. He's a really good man. I always love listening to him. Okay, so here we go. Let's look at this picture. Detail from 19th century mosaic illustrating the Kaaba in Mecca, the city where Muhammad was born and the holiest city in the Islamic world. Everyone knows the Kaaba, right? It's the black cube building. This is where Muslims, wherever they are in the world, they face toward Mecca, right? I'm sure that you've heard Mecca before. Mecca's used sometimes in pop culture as like, oh, it's a Mecca for, whatever. This is the original meaning of it right here. Okay, so he says, for good or ill, virtually no day passes when Islam and Muslims aren't in the news headlines. Understandably, many non-Muslims, including Latter-day Saints, are curious, even concerned. Do we share anything in common with our Muslim neighbors? Can we live and work together? First, some historical background may be helpful. And by the way, I haven't read this yet. I know it's going to be a good one. In 610 AD, a middle-aged Arabian merchant named Muhammad climbed the hills above his native town of Mecca to reflect and pray about the religious confusion surrounding him. Sound familiar to us, Latter-day Saints? Afterward, he reported that he had received a vision calling him as a prophet to his people. This event marks the beginning of the religion known as Islam, a word that means submission to God. A believer of Islam is called a Muslim, meaning submitter. Thereafter, Muhammad said he received many revelations until his death nearly 25 years later. Which is interesting because Joseph Smith, I think he lived, well, how old was he when he died? Was it like 42 or something? How old was Joseph Smith when he died? 38 years. So if you compare the two, the time in which they had their experience as prophets, because like 38 minus 25, that would take you to 13 years old. So Joseph Smith and Muhammad virtually spent the same amount of time as a prophet, about 25 years. That is fascinating. I feel like there's a parallel there. Joseph Smith and Muhammad spent about the same amount of time as prophets. Okay. He shared them first with the residents of his hometown, warning of divine judgments to come, summoning his audience to repentance and to proper treatment of widows, orphans, and the poor, and preaching the universal resurrection of the dead and the ultimate judgment of God. However, the ridicule and persecution to which he and his followers were subject became so intense that they were obliged to flee to the town of Medina, roughly 4 days camel ride to the north. Again, persecution, ridicule, we're pretty familiar with that as Latter-day Saints, especially in the early days of the church, and literally having to go from one location and then settling in a new location. So in this case, for Muhammad, it was from Mecca to Medina. And Medina, by the way, is the second holiest place in Islam. Both Mecca and Medina are in Saudi Arabia. In fact, let's pull this up. Saudi Arabia. Let's look at it on the map, shall we? So you can see it right here. Here's Mecca. Here's Mecca right here. And then Medina up here. And then the third holiest place is Jerusalem, specifically Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as Qibli. So one, 2, 3. But these two are in Saudi Arabia. The third one is in Israel. And here's Mecca. Let's zoom in. And by the way, if I remember right, you are not allowed to even enter this city, the entire city, unless you are a Muslim. And there's the Kaaba right there, the black building. In fact, let's see if there's like a 360 view. That is so cool. Notice, now I watched one time on Netflix, there was a really good documentary about performing the Hajj. The Hajj is where you make a pilgrimage to here. There's like a set of observances, rituals that you're supposed to perform. You walk around the Kaaba, I think, 7 times, and then there's other things that you do. And it was really kind of amazing. You notice how they're wearing white. They're wearing white robes. And as I was watching that documentary, it, in some sense, it kind of made me think about the temple, and just the sacredness. Anyway, I can't get into all of it, but just look at that. This is a beautiful thing. It's beautiful, and this is a very nice area. Like, I like the atmosphere of this right here. This building, this is obviously new. I can't remember, but this is actually one of the tallest buildings in the world. I think it's mostly a hotel, but I think it might have other things in there too. But anyway, okay, so let's go back to it. There in Medina, Muhammad's role changed dramatically. From being solely a preacher and a warner, he became the lawgiver, judge, and political leader of an important Arabian town, and over time of the Arabian Peninsula. That's similar to Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was a mayor. He was the mayor of Nauvoo. And I don't know all the details, like everything that he's ever been. He was also a military commander. I think he had. Okay, I think he was. Okay, what military rank did Joseph Smith have? I think, yeah, Lieutenant General. Joseph Smith was made a Lieutenant General, a title previously held in the United States only by George Washington, and organized parades to show off the Legion's strength. This is in NewYorker.com. I'll pull this up and I'll put this link in the description if you want to check it out. But so when it comes to military ranks, you have, okay, how's it go? So the lowest rank of general is Brigadier General. Let's see, okay, so it goes Brigadier General, and then higher than that is Major General. and then lieutenant general, and then after that, general, like a 4-star general. And then during times of huge conflict, like World War II, then you also have 5-star generals. But so that's pretty dang. That's pretty dang high. So Joseph Smith was a mayor. He was a lieutenant general. Uh, so you can see a lot of similarities between Muhammad and Joseph Smith. Um, okay, this early establishment of a community of believers gave Islam a religious identity rooted in law and justice that remains among its most striking and consequential characteristics. Two principal factions emerged among Muhammad's followers after his death in 632 AD. Same thing happened. Same thing happened with our church. Of course, we have the main church that moved on. That's us. But then you had the RLDS, which was I believe it was probably the second largest, and it had to do. It's like, okay. I think the RLDS. You know what? I'm not going to look it up, but I think that had to do with because they thought that, okay, who's going to be the prophet? Who's going to succeed Joseph Smith? And the RLDS went with his son, I think. Let's see. Who was the founder of the RLDS? And of course, we know that it's changed to Community of Christ. That's what they're called now. The Community of Christ, known from 1872 to 2001 as the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Okay, I'm just going to have to come here. The church traces its origins to Joseph Smith's establishment of the Church of Christ on April 6, 1930. A group of members, including his eldest son, Joseph Smith III, formally established the current church April 6, 1860. So, okay, now keep that in mind. So Joseph Smith's eldest son is the one that is responsible for this split, right? Look what happens over here with Islam. Okay, two principal factions emerged among Muhammad's followers after his death in 632 AD, dividing initially over the question of who should succeed him as the leader of the Islamic community. The largest of these has come to be called Sunni. It claims to follow the Sunnah, or customary practice of Muhammad, and is relatively flexible on the matter of succession. The other, which grew up around Muhammad's son-in-law Ali, was called the Shi'at Ali, the faction of Ali, and is now widely known simply as the Shia. Unlike Sunnis, the Shia, known as Shiite or Shiite Muslims, believe that the right to succeed Muhammad as leaders of the community properly belongs to the Prophet Muhammad's nearest male relative, Ali, and his heirs. It's like the same thing, you guys. And let's see, Sunni versus Shia population. The overwhelming majority of Muslims are Sunnis, while an estimated 10 to 13% are Shias. That's very similar to our church because the vast majority did go on with Brigham Young and are currently the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where you have a very small percentage that are part of these like other break-off churches, the primary of which was the Community of Christ. So if we were Islam, we would be Sunnis. If you were to like make a corresponding connection between us and Islam. And that's not to say that Shiites are bad or anything like that. I'm just kind of showing you how it's a very similar situation. I'm sure that's why he's writing all this. I'll bet he's going to explain later, like, hey, remember what I just said? Well, think about our church. Okay. Where were we? So, of course, Joseph Smith's nearest male relative was his own son, his eldest son, Joseph Smith III. Despite such disagreements, the Islamic world has been more unified, religiously speaking, than Christendom. Furthermore, the several centuries after about 800 AD, Islamic civilization was arguably the most advanced in the world in terms of science, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. Sources of Muslim doctrine and practice. The revelations claimed by Muhammad were gathered into a book called the Quran, from the Arabic verb qara'a, to read or to recite. Within a decade or two of his death, composed of 114 chapters, the Quran isn't a story about Muhammad. Much like the Doctrine and Covenants, it's not a narrative at all. Muslims regard it as the word and words of God directly to Muhammad. Okay, so this is their Doctrine and Covenants, but that's basically all they have. No, I think that they do read. I want to say that they read the Bible, or at least they see it. They have like this concept of the people of the book, which are like Jews and Christians. The book referring to, I think, the Bible, but I don't know that they necessarily read. I don't know. Christians reading it will find familiar themes. It speaks, for example, of God's creation of the universe in 7 days, his placement of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, their temptation by the devil, their fall, and the call for a line of subsequent prophets, most of whom also appear in the Bible. These prophets are described in the Quran as Muslims, having submitted their wills to God. Abraham, described as the friend of God, figures prominently in the text. Among other things, he is believed to have received revelations that he wrote down, but that have since been lost. And that we have that same belief. We have the book of Abraham. Moses, Pharaoh, and the exodus of the children of Israel also play a role. Strikingly, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is mentioned 34 times in the Quran, as compared with 19 times in the New Testament. So, more times in the Quran than in the New Testament. She is, in fact, the only woman named in the Quran. One constant Quranic refrain is the doctrine of Tawhid, Tawheed, a word that might be translated as monotheism, or more literally as making one. It represents one of the central principles of Islam, that there is only one entirely unique divine being. He does not beget, nor is he begotten, declares the Quran, and there is none like him. What follows from this is surely the most important distinction between Islam and Christianity. Muslims don't believe in the deity of Jesus Christ or the Holy Ghost. It also indicates that while all people are equally creations of God, according to Islamic doctrine, we are not his children. Yet Muslims believe Jesus to have been a sinless prophet of God, born of a virgin, and destined to play a central role in the events of the last days. He is mentioned frequently and reverently in the Quran. Basic Muslim teachings and practices. The so-called 5 pillars of Islam, most concisely summarized not in the Quran but in a statement traditionally ascribed to Muhammad, set forth some basic Islamic doctrine. Number 1, testimony. If Islam has a universal creed, it is the Shahada, profession of faith, or testimony. The term refers to an Arabic formula that, translated, runs as follows. Quote, I testify that there is no God but there is no God but God, Allah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. The Shahada is the entryway into Islam. To recite it with sincere belief is to become a Muslim. Okay, so I'm not a Muslim. The Arabic equivalent of the word God is Allah, a contraction of the words al, which means the, and Illah, God. So it's like the God. It's not a proper name, but a title, and it's closely related to the Hebrew word Elohim. Since there is no Islamic priesthood, there are there are no priesthood ordinances, nor is there a single Islamic church. Thus, professing the Shahada is, in a sense, the Islamic equivalent of baptism. The current lack of a formal, unified, worldwide leadership structure has other implications. For example, there's no overall leader of the world's Muslims. Nobody who speaks for the entire community. Muhammad is almost universally regarded as the final prophet. This also means that there is no church from which terrorists or heretics can be excommunicated. Okay, so that's important to keep in mind. It's like, well, why don't they just excommunicate him? Well, they can't. That they're not set up the same way that we are. Okay, number 2, prayer. And here's a picture of them praying. I don't know where this is at, but this looks very similar to what's it called? Al-Aqsa Mosque. Well, I don't remember the stained glass window. I'm not sure. I don't know where that is. I wish there was a little caption underneath. Many non-Muslims are aware of the Muslim ritual prayer called Salat, which involves a specific number of physical prostrations 5 times daily. Reciting prescribed verses from the Quran and touching the forehead to the ground demonstrates humble submission to God. Right? Islam, submission. More spontaneous prayer, called dua, can be offered at any time and does not require prostration. For midday prayers on Friday, Muslim men are required and Muslim women encouraged to pray in a mosque. From Arabic masjid, or place of prostration. They're in gender-separated groups, which is interesting. Think of the temple there. They're in gender-separated groups. They form lines, pray as led by the mosque's imam. Imam from Arabic amama, meaning in front of, and listen to a short sermon. Fridays, however, aren't quite equivalent to the Sabbath, although the weekend in most Muslim countries centers on Yom al-Jum'ah, the day of gathering, or Friday. Working on that day isn't considered sinful. Okay, so they can work on Fridays. Number 3, almsgiving. Zakat, meaning that which purifies, denotes making charitable donations to support the poor, as well as to mosques and other Islamic undertakings. It is generally reckoned at 2.5% of the Muslims' total wealth above a certain minimum amount. In some Muslim countries, it's gathered by government institutions. In others, it's voluntary. So it's basically, it's kind of like a tithing or fast offering. Number 4, fasting. Every year, devout Muslims abstain from food, drink, and sexual relations from sunrise until sunset during the entire lunar month of Ramadan. And just by way of note, that's what we're currently in right now. I can't remember when it ends, but I know that we're still in it at the time of this recording. They also commonly devote themselves to special charity toward the poor and to reading the Quran during the month. Number 5, pilgrimage. Okay, that's what we were just talking about, the Hajj. And here's Mecca again. Muslims possessing the health and resources to do so should undertake a pilgrimage to Mecca at least once in their lifetimes. A visit to Medina, the second holiest city in Islam, is typically included, but isn't required. For faithful Muslims, doing so is a deeply spiritual and moving event, something like attending General Conference in person or entering the temple for the first time. And I can attest, when I was watching that documentary, and I would encourage you to find some documentary so you can see this, it does feel spiritual. It feels like you can feel the spirit there. Now, remember, I'm not saying that this is a true religion. They obviously they have some things wrong from our theological point of view. But again, I think there's more in common than there is different, and I think that they have been prepared by God in their own way during this mortal life to advance after this life and obtain exaltation. I think that during this mortal life, things don't really work out for everybody. Obviously, we've had the great apostasy. We've had so many people that haven't even had a chance to accept the gospel in this life. But when it comes down to it, they're going to. That's why we have the spirit world, and It's not like, oh, well, sorry, you were born at the wrong time, or you were born in the wrong country. So I think that this is the Lord's doing right here, preparing them for the eternities, and this is what they um, have in order to progress spiritually in this life. Um, okay, some current issues. Three focal points of contemporary non-Muslim concern about Islam are religious violence, Islamic or Sharia law, and Islam's treatment of women. Some extremists have used the term jihad to refer exclusively to holy war, but the word actually means practical work as opposed to mere prayer and scripture study. Muslim jurists and thinkers have varied in their understanding of jihad. Standard legal sources argue, for instance, that acceptable military jihad must be defensive in that opponents must be forewarned and allowed opportunity to seize provocative actions. Some jurists and other Muslim thinkers today argue that jihad can designate any practical action intended to benefit the Islamic community or to improve the world more generally. Muhammad is said to have distinguished between the greater jihad and the lesser jihad. The latter, he said, is warfare, but the greater jihad is to combat injustice as well as one's personal resistance to living righteously. Today's Islamist, I'm going to avoid certain words, claims religious roots, but it arguably reflects social, political, and economic grievances that have little or no connection to the religion as such. Moreover, it's important to note that the vast majority of the world's Muslims have not joined the terrorists in their violence. Oh, I just said it. Sharia is another point of concern for some non-Muslims. Drawn from the Quran and the Hadith, brief reports of what Muhammad and his closest associates said and did that provide models of Muslim behavior supplement and explain Quranic passages. It is a code of Muslim conduct. Rules governing both male and female dress, such as the hijab or veil, and think about veils and stuff like that, are found in Sharia law or in Sharia. While they're enforced by some Muslim countries, they're left to individual choice in others. Sharia also covers such matters as personal hygiene, the time and content of prayer, the rules governing marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Thus, when Muslims indicate in surveys that they wish to be governed by Sharia, they may not be making a political statement. They may simply be saying that they aspire to live genuinely Muslim lives. I guess you could say, like, if there was like such a thing, an equivalent with our church, it's like, do you live by the Articles of Faith? Well, yeah, of course I do. Anyway. Many non-Muslims, when they think of Islam's treatment of women, immediately think of polygamy and veils, but the cultural reality is far more complex. Many passages in the Quran declare women to be equal to men, while others seem to assign them subordinate roles. Certainly there are practices in many Islamic countries, often with roots in pre-Islamic tribal culture, or other pre-existing customs, that render women subservient. However, the way Muslims see women's roles varies considerably from country to country, and even within countries. Okay, Latter-day Saint views of Islam. Despite our different beliefs, how can Latter-day Saints approach building relationships with Muslims? First of all, we should recognize Muslims' right to worship how, where, and what they may, according to Articles of Faith 1. Number 11. In 1841, Latter-day Saints on the City Council of Nauvoo passed an ordinance on religious freedom guaranteeing free toleration and equal privileges to the Catholics, Presbyterians, Methodists, Baptists, Latter-day Saints, Quakers, Episcopals, Universalists, Unitarians, Mohammedans, or Muslims, and all other religious sects and denominations, whatever. We should also recall that our church leaders have generally been strikingly positive in their appreciation for the founder of Islam. In 1855, for example, in a time when many Christians condemned Muhammad as an antichrist, we read this in a recent video, and it's always this idea right here about a singular it just feels so not good, not right, wrong. I feel like people that like to call people things, that like to demonize people, that they just love this idea. They just love this idea of a big bad person that is okay to like not like. See my playlist about Antichrist for my thoughts on that. Anyway, when many Christians condemn Muhammad as an Antichrist, um, Elders George A. Smith and Parley P. Pratt of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles delivered lengthy sermons not only manifesting an impressively informed and fair understanding of Islamic history, but also praising Muhammad himself. Elder Smith remarked that Muhammad, quote, was no doubt raised up by God on purpose, end quote, to preach against idolatry, and he expressed sympathy for Muslims who, like the Latter-day Saints, find it hard, quote, to get an honest history, end quote, written about them. Speaking immediately afterward, Elder Pratt expressed admiration for Muhammad's teachings and for the morality and institutions of Muslim society. A more recent official statement came in 1978 from the first presidency. It specifically mentions Muhammad among, quote, the great religious leaders of the world, end quote, saying that, like them, he, quote, received a portion of God's light. Moral truths were given to these leaders by God, end quote, wrote President Spencer W. Kimball, N. Eldon Tanner, and Marion G. Romney, quote, to enlighten whole nations and to bring a higher level of understanding to individuals, end quote. Okay, building on common ground. While Latter-day Saints and Muslims obviously differ on important matters, notably the divinity of Jesus Christ, his role as Savior, and the calling of modern prophets, we have many things in common. We both believe, for example, that we are morally accountable before God, that we should pursue both personal righteousness and a good and just society, and that we will be resurrected and brought before God for judgment. Both Muslims and Latter-day Saints believe in the vital importance of strong families and in the divine command to help the poor and needy, and that we demonstrate our faith through acts of discipleship. There seems no reason why Latter-day Saints and Muslims cannot do so alongside one another, and even when opportunities present themselves, by cooperating together in communities where, more and more, we find ourselves neighbors in an increasingly secular world. Together, we can demonstrate that religious faith can be a powerful force for good, and not merely a source of strife and even violence, as some critics argue. The Quran itself suggests a way of living peacefully together, despite our differences. Quote, if God had willed, he could have made you a single community, but he desired to test you in what he has given you. So compete with one another in good deeds. You will all return to God, and he will inform you regarding the things wherein you used to disagree. That's really nice. Okay, so that's going to be it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope that you personally try and understand more about them, because you may in your lifetime, maybe you already do, but you may in your lifetime need to have kind of an understanding of them in order to help them. Either just, whether it be just being kind to somebody, giving them a good impression of the church, if you can understand them, I think that that's going to go a long way in your personal interactions with them, and it may even be critical to them wanting to know more about the church, especially in the first part of the millennium. So just keep that stuff in mind. Just keep it in mind, okay? If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it. Make sure to leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share this. I really think that this is something that we could all do better as Latter-day Saints, and I'll talk to you guys later.